Pay attention to the girl in the white jacket. Her name is Emily Sanders. She had just left her evening shift at Brighton Valley Cafe and was less than 5 minutes from home. She thought it was over. She thought it was just another normal night. But what happened next would change everything. Just after 7:15 p.m., a sleek black Dodge Charger appeared behind her, flashing red and blue emergency lights through the windshield. She thought she was being pulled over by a police officer. But this wasn't a traffic stop. It was an ambush. By 7:16 p.m., her dashcam captured the man who approached her window, uniformed, serious, with a flashlight in hand. But by 7:22, Emily's phone would stop responding. By 9 neo, her younger sister Haley, growing increasingly panicked, dialed 911. On the report, she said something that chilled the dispatcher. "My sister never just doesn't come home. Something's wrong. What if someone took her?" That one question would spark an investigation that crossed state lines and would ultimately expose the real evil behind a stolen badge. Emily Sanders was 22 years old. She was a quiet force, a visual arts student at Bellevue Community College who supported herself through school. She worked evening shifts at the Brighton Valley Cafe, often staying late to cover for coworkers. She was responsible, careful, always checking in with her family. Emily had big dreams. She wanted to move to Los Angeles, work in costume design, and create for the screen. She sketched constantly, on napkins, in notebooks, on her tablet. Everything was about color, texture, and character. People close to her called her the calm inside the storm. Even when life got stressful, Emily never spiraled. That night, September 22, 2024, she ended her shift at 6:47 p.m. Security cameras caught her as she waved goodbye, unlocked her silver 2014 Toyota Corolla, and pulled out of the cafe's small parking lot. At 6:58, she called her mom during the drive, something she often did as part of her routine. She mentioned the sky looked stormy, that the streets were unusually empty. Nothing seemed suspicious. Until 7:12 p.m. That's when an unmarked black Charger pulled in behind her, flashing red and blue emergency lights. To anyone else, it would look real. The strobes were installed behind the grille and dashboard, just like in real patrol vehicles. Without hesitation, and without fear, Emily pulled over. It was the cautious, responsible thing to do. But this wasn't law enforcement. It was someone pretending to be. Less than a minute later, the man approached her driver's side window wearing what appeared to be a full police uniform. Badge, navy blue top, duty belt, shoulder radio, flashlight. The reflection from his badge bounced directly into her dashcam. He looked like the real thing. But there were subtle problems. His belt lacked a regulation holster. His badge number didn't match the Brighton department format. And on closer inspection, the department patch on his sleeve had a barely noticeable design flaw, one indicating it wasn't standard issue, or even real. That tiny camera mounted on Emily's rearview mirror recorded almost everything, until 7:52 p.m., when the feed cuts to black. Investigators would later determine that someone had reached inside the car and physically disabled it. The lens caught the moment light from the flashlight flared, and the outline of the man leaning closer through her window. And then nothing. That was the last moment anyone saw or heard from Emily Sanders alive and in control of her surroundings. By 7:30, her mom's texts weren't being read. By 7:48, her calls were going straight to voicemail. Her sister Haley assumed a dead battery, but that quickly turned to dread. At 8:54 p.m., barely 2 hours after she'd last seen her daughter, Emily's mother filed a missing persons report with Brighton PD. She emphasized that Emily had no history of running away, no fights, no strange behavior. Officer response was noted as low-risk adult female not currently in emergency danger. But what no one in that station yet realized is that a fake cop had just pulled a girl off the street in plain sight and gotten away with it. Emily's father, Derek, had installed the dash cam just 3 months prior after she'd gotten into a minor fender bender. It was supposed to be a safeguard. That decision, one that seemed overly cautious at the time, became the first turning point in the case. The next morning, Emily's father pulled the SD card himself and brought it to police. What the footage showed erased any doubt. This was not a disappearance. This was an abduction. Police reviewed the clip over and over. The uniform, the car, the timing. There were no police units in the area during that time frame. No stop logged in dispatch. Whoever took Emily did it without legal authority. That man in uniform wasn't one of them. Facial enhancement failed to yield a match. Fingerprints? None were left behind. But the dashcam had done something else. It had captured inconsistencies. Investigators zoomed in frame by frame and noticed that the uniform had strange design details. A shoulder patch missing its precinct number. An outdated badge format. A belt without proper holster loop designs. It was all an imitation. A damn convincing one. But still, fake. With help from the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit, analysts built a partial profile. Caucasian male, late 30s to early 40s. Likely someone with exposure to law enforcement structure, possibly from military, private security, or corrections background. Someone methodical, highly organized, and most chillingly, someone who had rehearsed this. Agents believed this was not a first-time offense. The clean interaction, the high-quality uniform and gear, the dismantling of Emily's dashcam, it all suggested this man had done this before. Like a performance practiced to perfection. For a week, there were no breaks in the case. Emily's face was plastered on the news. Nationwide alerts circulated. Her friends combed through her text messages, checking for anything out of the ordinary. Nothing. She had told no one she was meeting anyone. There were no threats. Nothing. And the longer the case went without a suspect, the more hopeless it seemed. Until someone came forward. Maya Kellerman, an independent crime journalist who had followed cold cases across the country, saw the dashcam footage posted in a national bulletin. She recognized something about the uniform. And the car. Because exactly 2 years earlier, a young woman named Elise Holloway reported an attempted police impersonation outside Lancaster, Pennsylvania. A man in a nearly identical outfit. Same car model, same setup, flashing lights from the dash. But Elise had felt something was off. She didn't pull over. Instead, she called 911, and dispatch told her not to stop. When real officers responded 5 minutes later, the fake cop was gone. That case had gone cold. No fingerprint. No ID. But it had been logged and archived, buried in neglected databases. Now, 2 years later, Brighton PD reopened that file. Details between the two cases matched disturbingly well. Height, method, even tone of voice, as paraphrased in Elise's interview. She remembered how calm he sounded, like someone trained, capable. Investigators now knew this wasn't random, and it wasn't local. Whoever he was, he'd crossed state lines, impersonated a cop at least twice, and this time, succeeded. Police focused on tracking the vehicle, what little they could see of the Dodge Charger from the dash footage. Its plate wasn't visible in Emily's video. But a camera on Marlowe Avenue, just 3 blocks from the scene, picked up a black Charger exiting onto I-78 at 7:25 p.m., just minutes after the dashcam went dark. License plate readers recorded the tags, TCS 4981. But that plate traced back to a rental company in Ohio. That same vehicle had been reported stolen 2 weeks earlier. No follow-up, no rerouted paperwork. A second hit caught the same tags at an oil change shop in Canton, Ohio. Just 2 days before Emily was abducted. The man inside presented an Ohio driver's license under the name Richard Langford, an identity previously flagged in at least 3 other rental scams out of Kentucky and Michigan. They were still chasing a ghost. But now, that ghost had a crack in the mask. The man who pulled over Emily Sanders wasn't a cop. He wasn't even Richard Langford. But cops were finally closing in on who he really was. The man seen in the footage, tall, clean uniform, exacting posture, had left nearly nothing behind. No physical DNA, no contact information, no witnesses outside of what a few blurry external cameras could offer. But there was now pressure coming down from the top. The Bureau had opened a federal impersonation and kidnapping case, and the interstate pattern pointed toward a far more elaborate offender than local detectives originally imagined. Interpolating the previous Richard Langford appearances, the Bureau began comparing travel routes, timestamps, and logistics. Whoever he was mobile. He didn't stay in one place long, and he knew how to rent vehicles using stolen credentials that originated online months prior. Each fake license, each forged credit card, followed the same signature pattern, delivered through deeply buried darknet leaks, anonymized by Russian drop vendors. It was clear that this was not an unhinged loner acting on spontaneous impulse. This was a man who planned, who rehearsed, and who studied law enforcement closely enough to mimic it convincingly. Fugitives like him, the team said, often share one thing in common. They train for the performance, not because they admire cops, but because they understand the power people give them. Every time they dress the part, they gain blind access. Back in Brighton, Emily's family was unraveling. Her younger sister Haley refused to sleep in her room. Her father Derek spent every night on his computer, clicking through forums, surveillance threads, and missing persons archives. He was convinced that if their Emily had been targeted, other girls had too. On October 2nd, 10 days after the abduction, his hunch was finally confirmed. A detective in Indiana named Clara Rowe responded to the FBI's national bulletin on the Richard Langford name with a case of her own. It was incomplete. A cold file, nearly identical. In October of 2023, a woman named Cassandra Doyle, 20, had gone missing outside of Fort Wayne after being pulled over by a supposed cop while coming home from night classes. She had told a friend by phone during the stop, "There's a cop behind me. He doesn't have a marked vehicle, but he flashed lights. I'm pulling over." That was her last communication. No video, no trace, no suspect ever identified. But her disappearance echoed Emily's in terrifying symmetry. Unmarked car, late evening, black uniform, total disappearance. Both girls were young, smart, predictable and routine. They didn't go to parties, didn't take risks. And both had a habit of calling family when traveling alone. With multiple regions now involved, a working group was established between the Brighton PD, Fort Wayne PD, FBI BAU, and Ohio State Police. The target suspect was assigned a codename, Phantom Badge. A task force began reviewing cases of similar impersonations from the last 5 years. Those that involved women, nighttime stops, and disappearances with no follow-up contact. And then, like ice cracking under pressure, a name surfaced quietly, almost accidentally. Jared Kessler, an Ohio resident, 39 years old, former private security contractor at correctional facilities. He had applied to 3 different law enforcement academies over a 3-year window, rejected for psychological screenings every time. Someone determined he wasn't stable enough to serve. But evidently, no one thought he was dangerous enough to watch. Back in 2019, Kessler had posted anonymously in policing forums, asking things like, "Where do real cops get light bar kits that don't trigger speeding cameras?" And, "Does a non-sworn officer have to wear real patches if off-duty during public events?" At the time, moderators didn't take it seriously. His posts were cryptic, but didn't violate any laws. And then, he disappeared. Online and offline. His last profile activity ceased in 2021. When FBI agents visited the apartment listed on his old driver's license, they found the building abandoned and condemned. But what was found in a public storage facility registered to the same name made everything real. Behind a rust-orange steel door was a plastic bin filled with disturbing artifacts. Several replica police uniforms, a light kit, sewn-on patches that matched the footage from Emily's final dashcam moments. Even a prop badge worn smooth from use, with the word "Respect" engraved on the reverse side. It wasn't real department issue. It wasn't even sold publicly. It was a custom engraving, one that would later be found etched again, on the interior panel of the black Charger. Because by that point, on October 7th, the car had been found, abandoned inside a shipping container just outside Toledo. No fingerprints except for smudged gloves. No clear DNA. No signs of Emily. But what they did find was a used burner phone smashed on the back seat. Its SIM card had been shattered purposefully. But the phone itself had one fragment of recoverable data, a GPS waymark, just the coordinates of a single drop point. Galabridge Forest Preserve, 22 miles away. Remote. Barely trafficked in the fall. On October 9th, a full sweep was conducted using cadaver dogs, forensic teams, and helicopter surveillance. And there, in a shallow foliage-covered drop about 70 yards from the main road, they found the single strongest piece of evidence since Emily's dashcam. It wasn't her body, but it was her phone. Bent, water-damaged, and still faintly readable. The last photo taken was unknown to the family. The sky was dark. A figure about 12 feet away stood near what looked like a car's trunk. The image was blurry, poorly lit, half obscured by a finger, but the coordinates matched. The timestamp read September 22nd, 7:48 p.m., 90 minutes after her last confirmed contact. Somehow, in that window of terror, Emily had snapped a photo. Whether as evidence or instinct. Even the forensics teams didn't speculate. They just handed it over silently. The man in that photo, between darkness, blur, and brush, was tall, wearing black, his posture matching that of the impersonator from her dashcam. By comparing scale to nearby tree trunks and light reflections, they made an estimate, 6 feet even, roughly 200 pounds. Consistent shoe tread profile to the ones recovered from the forest floor. Boot-stitched Vibram soles. On the same night, a quiet call was placed to the house of Jared Kessler's former employer in northern Kentucky. His previous address there had long since changed, but a neighbor, an old woman with 5 owned cats and a backyard greenhouse, told police, "He still comes back here sometimes, just parks, watches the street, doesn't knock, just watches." When asked when she last saw him, 3 days ago, it was October 6th, he was back. The next few hours would be a cat-and-mouse hunt with multiple agencies converging on time gaps and road camera sightings. Jared Kessler, the man everyone believed to have slipped forever into digital shadow, was now real, tangible, sloppy, because Emily Sanders, in her final active minutes, had left breadcrumbs her killer never expected, and those breadcrumbs were building a trail straight to his door. The final phase of the manhunt began just before dawn on October 10th. By then, local police, FBI field agents, and U.S. Marshals had pieced together a pattern familiar in Kessler's movements. Though he had no official address, his financial records showed scattered purchases, gas, groceries, and tool rentals, along a tight, repetitive pattern across rural portions of Ohio, Kentucky, and northern West Virginia. Data from the GPS ping recovered in Emily's damaged phone helped create a heat map centered on abandoned properties within driving range. Kessler didn't stay in hotels. He stayed off-grid. Storage units, rural hunting cabins, seasonal rentals under fake names, all temporary. That morning, agents narrowed their search to a largely unpatrolled area just outside Ashland, Kentucky. It didn't take long. Using a drone thermal scan over a defunct Christmas tree farm, they spotted a single truck parked deep along a dirt path hidden under pine canopy. Quiet. Engine cold. A 2006 Silverado, registered under a dead identity, flagged in West Virginia months earlier. He was there. At 5:43 a.m., agents surrounded the shack. No electricity, no running water. A hand-built barricade of salvage furniture blocked the door. Kessler didn't fight. He didn't run. When the door was forced open, he stood there, fully clothed, hands up. On the table beside him, a loaded pistol, a burner phone, a folded police uniform shirt. Still warm, as if just taken off. When asked his name, he said calmly, "Richard Langford." When pressed further, he smiled slowly and added, "Whatever name you need me to be today." It was over. But the nightmare hadn't ended. Not even close. During initial interviews, Kessler remained cooperative, but vague. He admitted he'd interacted with Emily Sanders, but refused to elaborate. "She was brave," he said. "Smarter than I expected." When detectives brought up the dashcam footage, he chuckled. "Should have checked her rear view," he murmured. "She flinched when I tapped the badge. Meant she still believed it." But when asked the critical question, "Where is Emily?" he gave nothing. Hours turned to days. Eventually, federal prosecutors prepared to charge him with kidnapping across state lines, impersonation of a federal officer, and multiple counts of vehicle and identity fraud. But without a body, the central case, the case of Emily Sanders, remained technically unresolved, until October 14th. Kessler's former employer, a private security firm in Lexington, allowed the FBI to inspect his old locker, previously untouched. Inside, they found a key, handwritten in marker, for Ava. Investigators traced the make to a chain of remote seasonal cabins off Halberton Ridge, operated by a private family business. One cabin hadn't been leased in over a year. Agents accessed the property that evening. From the outside, it looked untouched. Overgrown grass, no tire marks. But once inside, what they discovered was nothing short of gutting. There, lying in what remained of a stripped mattress, was a set of zip ties, soaked fabric, gloves, and in the locked bathroom, evidence of prolonged confinement. Scratches on the porcelain, broken fingernails, hair samples, bloodstains. And beneath the floorboards, Emily's wallet, ID, student card, cafe time card stamped September 22nd. But there was more. Cameras. 2 handheld devices and a mounted battery-operated lens fixed to the ceiling. Every piece of footage on those drives was encrypted, but one file wasn't. A recording, 1 hour long, mostly silent, timestamped the night after she vanished. It showed Emily, alive, bound, terrified, speaking softly, repeating lines, almost like a forced statement. Detectives who reviewed the tape only once refused to release it publicly. It became central evidence. But what investigators confirmed was this. Emily had been alive for at least 48 hours following her abduction. Kessler had kept her hidden, and eventually ended her life. He never admitted it, even as the charges stacked. But a grand jury didn't need his confession. By October 28th, Jared Kessler was formally indicted on 12 federal charges, including first-degree kidnapping resulting in death. A conviction that carried the death penalty. Still, for Emily's family there was one unhealed wound. The body itself. Where had he left her? That answer arrived from someone unexpected. A volunteer searcher named Noah Becker, a college student studying forestry, who joined one of the weekly search parties organized by local civil groups. On November 4th, while trekking along an unused ATV path near the Gala Bridge Preserve perimeter, less than 3 miles from the original GPS ping, he spotted something. A torn piece of white fabric tangled in brush. He stopped, moved forward, saw the shallow dip in the earth, called the team. Emily Sanders was there, covered in forest debris. Her remains had been hidden under hastily disturbed soil. The autopsy confirmed blunt force trauma to the head, followed by strangulation. She had died likely within 2, maybe 3 days of her disappearance. The forest became a place of silence, visited only by family and flowers in the weeks that followed. And Kessler? He never showed remorse. He spoke once in court, cold and technical. I studied authority because no one questions it. I didn't kill them. They gave me access, and I used it. Prosecutors pushed for the maximum penalty. In March of 2025, he was sentenced to death by lethal injection. And yet, questions lingered. Authorities connected him, posthumously, to at least 4 other unsolved disappearances by revisiting patrol impersonation reports going back 6 years. His timeline fit. His vehicle pattern matched. And in each case, the victims were young women, traveling alone, targeted not for who they were, but for the fact that they trusted the uniform. Emily's family created a foundation the following month. Emily's Light, a non-profit dedicated to digital self-defense training for young women, dashcam and GPS sponsorships, and pressure on law enforcement agencies to rapidly respond to police impersonation reports. They didn't want her case to be another cold statistic. She had fought, spoken, left clues. And in the end, that photo, the blurry image on her broken phone, became the key piece of evidence that placed Kessler at the scene, at the time, with no room to hide. Emily Sanders was smart, strong, brave. She didn't just become a victim of someone else's darkness. She lit the way through it.